Well, welcome to Psychology Today. I'm your host, Ann Morrow. Thank you for joining us. This is a show about bicycling in general and specifically about bicycle safety. I hope that Psychology Today inspires you to maybe ride a bike or to be more mindful of safety, bicycle safety, when you do ride your bike. We try to celebrate people in our community that promote cycling, that promote safe cycling, that maybe incorporate bicycling into some kind of an entrepreneurial endeavor. And certainly people that strive to encourage others to ride or to ride safely. So welcome, whatever your reason is. Thanks for joining us. Before we meet our guests, I want to be sure and thank our crew in the control booth for doing such a great job. They have to be specially trained and know how to run all the equipment, so we appreciate all the time that they've had to commit to this. And I want to thank our producer, Northwest Bicycle Safety Council. I am the president of Northwest Bicycle Safety Council, and we're finishing up our year feeling good that we placed a lot of helmets on heads this year. We're now over 16,000 helmets since the inception of the organization. So hopefully a lot of safety has been had, children and adults with helmets on their heads, and hopefully that did some good over the years. And we're looking already at the year 2018. What are we going to do next year? Our helmets have practically, as we speak, been ordered for 2018, and they'll be here in a few months, and we'll be out and about making sure that our community has helmets again. So our guests are Doug Decker, and he's going to share the vision of the SalmonBerry Trail. And if you don't know what the SalmonBerry Trail is, he's going to help you learn about that vision. And our second guest is Kristen Stallman, and she's going to share what she knows about the status of the Columbia River Gorge area that suffered a forest fire, a fire in that area. We like to ride the historic Columbia River Highway, so she's going to share her information with us as our second guest. So let's get started. And Doug Decker, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
So I always like to start with a little history. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came to be in the Portland area?
Well, my wife and I moved to Oregon in 1985 from Ireland via Montana. Yeah, so it's a complicated story, but we've been here for for 32 years, and definitely call this home. I've raised 2 kids here and very happy in the Portland area.
Well, good, good. Well, we're glad you're here, because we'll find out why here shortly. How did you get into bicycling?
Well, I think I can't remember a time when I haven't been on a bike. My wife and I bicycled through Belgium and France and Italy for our honeymoon. I was a bike commuter for 10 years between Northeast Portland and Forest Grove. I ride a few times a week now, and when we go places, and we travel a fair amount, I always try to get out on 2 wheels wherever we are. Yeah. Try
to incorporate a little cycling,
yes.
Huh? Well, good for you.
Yeah.
And what kind of riding do you enjoy now? Not so much commuting, but the occasional ride.
Right. So I'm semi-retired, so I'm not bike commuting, but I like to ride. I'm a historian, and I'm really interested in the history of neighborhoods and old houses. So I actually do a lot of my investigating while I'm riding around on a bike. And so I like to ride around town, and I like to ride loops from home and in Northeast Portland. Yeah, so that's and I like to ride rail trails, because that's what the SalmonBerry is all about.
Yes. Well, boy, you live in the perfect neighborhood then to just ride from home and see a lot of history and just do your thing.
Yep.
Good for you.
Yeah.
So what is your favorite ride that you could share with others?
Well, I would have 2. I would have an urban ride and a rural ride.
Okay.
And from home, I love to do the trip down the trolley trail down to Oregon City, and it's a rail trail. It's historic. It's scenic. Certainly fun to go down through Oregon City, and then to come back along, on the other side, go over the West Lynn Bridge, and then come back up through Tryon Creek State Park, down through the cemetery, and that's a good ride, and you can always feel good about yourself when you do it, and it's fun, and rain or shine, that's a nice one in the urban kind of ride. In the rural ride, we've been riding a bunch. We go over to Dufur and ride out of Dufur up to the top of Tie Ridge.
Okay.
And you know, Dufur is that place where the wheat meet the pine, and it's just absolutely beautiful. And so it's a good workout going up the top of Tie Ridge, and the view from up there is just remarkable down into the Deschutes, and there's a nice loop to come back down through the orchards down into Dufur. So you know, that's probably you could probably turn that into a nice 25, 30 mile loop, and a good workout too. There's 2 of them.
Yes, those are great ones.
Yep.
Yeah, I went to Dufur on a Cycle Oregon.
That's right.
Now, let me see, I'll probably mess this up. Ask not what you can do for Dufur, but ask no,
what
ask
Dufur
what can do for you. Yes,
right?
yes.
On the Welcome to Dufur sign.
That's okay. Okay, I thought that was pretty clever.
Yep.
So you are officially the SalmonBerry Trail Development Director. So what does that mean, and what does that job entail?
Well, so I work with a team of folks that are from the Tillamook Forest Heritage Trust and from state parks and the Department of Forestry that are developing the SalmonBerry Trail. And as a development director, my job is to spread the word, share the vision, and ultimately to establish partnerships of funding and support that will help us to build the trail. I've been along on this project from the beginning. I retired as the director of the Department of Forestry, and at that point, it was 2011 when 2012 when Tillamook County and the Port of Tillamook Bay came to state parks and the Department of Forestry. Tim Wood was head of state parks then. And they asked us, they had just experienced a catastrophic storm that washed out a whole bunch of the rail, the Port of Tillamook Bay rail line that went through there. And they were they knew that they weren't going to rebuild it, and they were looking for ideas to help them figure out what to do with it. And so we started a conversation. My board, the commission, the Parks Commission, those 2, we had Senator Betsy Johnson, others got involved, Cycle Oregon got involved in those discussions, the Grand Ronde Tribe, and from those discussions emerged this vision of an 84-mile-long rail trail that runs between Banks and Tillamook, the town of Banks west of Portland, and Tillamook, across the top of the Coast Range that connects urban and rural in the footprint of this heavily damaged, in the middle part, rail line. Parts of it were not damaged by the storm.
Sure.
But the middle part was pretty significantly hit. So my job is to help raise the funds to make it happen.
Now, just out of curiosity, did you go in initially with the idea of a Rails to Trails? Was that in your mind, or did that really kind of come up in conversation? It was
definitely in our minds. You know, probably in the 1980s, 1990s, the topic of rail trail is relative to the SalmonBerry and the Port of Tillamook Bay rail line and the Southern Pacific line prior to it being Port of Tillamook Bay has come up. There was a major storm in 1996 that damaged the rail line. It was rebuilt then. You know, it's in an awful place to try to maintain a rail line.
Yeah.
You know, the top of the Coast Range gets 160 inches of rain a year, and high winds, and it's just throughout the life of the line. It was built between 1905 and 1911. The kind of energy that it has taken to keep that line open, it's pretty amazing. It's a topic that's come up at key junctures in the past, but I think the magnitude of the damage in 2007, I think just it was calling for another solution.
So how did you, I guess you kind of talked about how you came to be involved. What is the SalmonBerry Trail? You kind of mentioned that and where it is. Can you go into a little more detail about exactly where it is?
Sure. You bet. If you've driven out Highway 26 out to, for instance, the Banks-Fredonia Trail, which is a cousin of the SalmonBerry, it's like right next to it. If you're driving out along Highway 26 and you see the rail line off to your right, you know, in that area around Buxton, Manning, west of Banks there. That is actually the Port of Tillamook Bay rail line.
Okay.
And then you cross it again. It crosses you, actually, a little bit further down the way on Highway 26. So it basically goes out parallel with 26, and then it cuts south of Highway 26 and goes over the top of the Coast Range through a place called Cochrane, and then down through Belding, down to Wheeler, and then it turns south just beyond Wheeler and goes down through Rockaway, Bay City, down to Tillamook, down to the Tillamook Airport, right? And it was actually the first way that Portland connected with the coast. It was there before any roads, and it was the way in the teens and 20s, the way people got to the beach for fun and for business, and it allowed for shipments of cheese and dairy products and timber and people back and forth through that corridor. It was really, it probably was one of the more important rail connections over the Coast Range during its time.
So you mentioned how remote it is, and let's talk about, you're touching on the history. Why did they build it right there? Because it seems like, in fact, it sounds like an awful location.
Well, I think the key was a couple thoughts. It was really built, the kind of key motivator was timber. And there's a town called Timber.
Yes.
It's not actually a town, but it's an unincorporated area and a community of people who who love that place and who know that place, have lived there. But the real lure for building the railroad was to really open up the woods for early logging. And there was logging camps all along the rail line in several different places, and mills in several different places. There was a mill up at the top of the Coast Range at Cochrane. So the idea was it made for the processing of wood, of timber, it made it much simpler. In other words, logs could be harvested, they could be dropped down low to the rail line, they could be then taken to a nearby mill and then pulled out. So that was really the primary focus for the placement of the line there. The Highway 6 was opened in 1941. The Sunset Highway, which was called the Wolf Creek Highway, was opened up in 1939 about. So that area between the Sunset and Highway 6, the SalmonBerry rail line kind of goes right through that part of the Coast Range. Yep.
And then coincidentally, people started using it to get to the coast. And, and then, interesting.
Right, in fact, the train was actually called the Daddy Train for a while, because during the 20s, what would happen would families would go over to the beach, they would go over to Bay Ocean, or they go to Rockaway or to Bay City, and they would be over there for the summer. And then on the weekends, on the Friday evenings, the dads would get on the train and they would ride over to the beach to be with their families, and they would come back. And actually, people referred to it at the time as the Daddy Train. So it moved a lot of people as well as a lot of products and things.
Yeah, and what an element of lifestyle in that era then.
Right.
Huh.
Yeah, as well as the communities along the line. You have Tillamook and Bay City and Wheeler, Rockaway, Timber and Banks. And you also have logging camps that were operating up in the uplands, adjacent to the rail lines. We know as well that long before that it was also parts of the way were a travel corridor for Native Americans passing between the Willamette Valley and the Oregon coast. So one of the neat things about the trail, the SalmonBerry Trail, is that it provides an opportunity to interpret so many different layers of Oregon history and put people in touch with the cultural history as well as the natural history of the outdoors.
So let's break this down into, and you do, and your website does, 4 different segments. We've got the coast, Nehalem River, and the SalmonBerry River, and the valley. Right. So why don't you delve into each of those and tell us a little bit about them.
Well, let's take a ride. How about that? If we
do
that,
perfect.
Right? So if we start in Banks, and we hope to be starting in Banks sometime in the next 3 to 5 years. If we start in Banks and ride west, that first stretch, we call it the valley stretch, and it's pretty flat. You've got ag fields, you've got forests in the uplands, and you actually go through a pretty significant tunnel, a number of trestles, and you're rising at a relatively light grade toward the top of the Coast Range, out to just beyond Timber. And so actually the valley segment goes all the way up to Cochrane, which is the top of the Coast Range where Washington County becomes Tillamook County. So imagine farm fields and timber, open timber, and a fairly simple gradient. That's the valley segment. You get up into the SalmonBerry, the next segment, which we think of as kind of the wild river segment. It's much more remote. There are no roads that go into the SalmonBerry Canyon. There is no cell phone coverage up there as well. We'll probably come back to that one. It's a place where the weather is the most challenging, the highest amount of rainfall, and the winds and the storms are the worst. And so in that stretch of the trail, while the first stretch, the valley stretch, is we're imagining it as a paved piece of trail. The next piece, that SalmonBerry piece, the more remote setting, is probably not. It's probably not going to be paved. And there are going to be places, because of the damage that's happened in the canyon, where the trail's probably going to have to come out of the canyon because it's just not feasible to build it back. Places where the whole rail bed has just been completely scoured and washed out. So it's just not practical to put a trail back in there. So we'll probably have to come out for that. And then you drop down to the Nehalem, and the Nehalem is, you have that, you have some pasture lands and kind of working dairy lands. You're still in the timber, but you're in a lighter, kind of a simpler gradient. It's not as remote. And then from that stretch, you kind of come around the corner there, around Wheeler or so, and head south just west of there. And that's the coast stretch. And the challenge, one of the challenges with the coastal stretch, is that it's very tight. You've got Highway 101, you've got Tillamook Bay, Nehalem Bay, and then Tillamook Bay, and you've got a rail line in there. And so some of the development questions that we have about that stretch are, where do you put, or can you put a trail, do a rail and trail?
Yes.
And so in that stretch, that's going to be it's going to be very costly to put a rail and trail there. There's a great enterprise happening right there now, the Oregon Coast Scenic Railway. They do scenic rail trains out of Rockaway that go up the line to the north a little bit now, and that's been really great for those communities. How we can really draft on each other and build on each other's strengths in that stretch and keep the construction costs down. That's going to be a question. So those are kind of the different personality types. The idea of the trail is some people may want to ride the whole thing, or you may want to walk a piece of it. And I suspect the people in the local communities on the west end, as well as in the Banks area, it may just be a thing to get out and walk a few miles for the day, and then there will be people who will be more adventurous, who will want to ride a chunk of it and maybe camp out overnight. Yeah. So it's going to offer that's the thing about it. It offers so many different types of access and different types of experiences.
So, and might there be equestrians, or is that going to be okay?
Yeah. So so
like
think non-motorized. So like Banks Vernonia, right? And so if you've ridden Banks Vernonia, you've got a pretty good picture of what the SalmonBerry will look like in that stretch, in the valley stretch on the eastern side, as well as in the Nehalem stretch on the western side. Yep.
So you say probably not paved because it's not feasible, kind of in the middle part. How do you envision the surface to be? What are you hoping for?
I would think of it. It's got to be wide enough to be able to accommodate equestrians and bikes and peds. So. I'm trying to think of a trail that people might relate to. It's probably a wider tread than you might see up on the Wildwood Trail in Forest Park, but probably not so wide that it creates issues in terms of maintenance. So, but I would say not pavement. It could be cinders. I think those are details that we have yet to figure out.
Yes, you haven't quite gotten to.
Right?
Yeah. So how far is it then from Banks to the end of what you're?
It's 84 miles.
Okay, so that's 84 miles.
Right.
So maybe for a strong person, that would be a day's ride. Perhaps, like you're saying, you want to go maybe halfway and stop. Do you then anticipate some kind of pullouts to be able to pitch a tent? Because I'm thinking trees and not a soft place
halfway
to put
is
my...
you're in trees and about halfway, yeah. I think, some of those questions kind of touch on the planning work that we're doing and that has been done and that needs to be done yet. There are, at that point, you are in the Tillamook State Forest. And in fact, pretty much all the way over the Coast Range, it's all Tillamook State Forest on either side, almost all. There's a couple of small private inholdings in there. There are some developed campsites, campgrounds in the Tillamook now. There's Rears Camp, which is a horse camp on the eastern side. There's the Nehalem Falls Campground on the western side. And I think the kind of question is, what will development of the trail mean for those existing facilities? And is there a need to be thinking about some other facilities with the idea of a kind of natural stopping point, waypoint, like you've mentioned? And I think those are items that are on the drawing board right now. We've done we've done a plan. Each segment, we've done a plan for the coastal segment. We're just now completing the plan for the valley segment. And we're working with local advisory committees and local landowners along the trail to help us think about, those questions, including how we can tie into existing recreation opportunities. Like one of the first pieces that we hope that we'll be able to build will be a connecting trail that will loop into the Banks Vernonia Trail and take you, you'll be able to go out the SalmonBerry line and then loop back up, go over a trestle, loop back up to the BV Trail, and then go up into Stubbs Stewart State Park. So those types of catalyst projects that we hope that we can get done early will begin to show people, introduce them to this idea, and show what the vision of access throughout the whole trail could be.
Right. And I like that because Stubbs Stewart seems to be so popular now. It really seems to have gained a great reputation for biking in there and staying. And so you're right, if you could add a whole entire different loop, that sounds like something that would have a lot of appeal to a lot of people.
Yes, I believe so.
It does start to get very exciting. So you've been having meetings, and so what's been the biggest challenge so far?
I think the biggest challenge, well, I might mention a couple. I think just having the capacity to do the work, to do the homework. I think this is a project that is known for doing its homework and the planning. It's basically, State Parks has an incredibly capable person named Dennis Wiley, who is the project manager for the SalmonBerry Trail. The trust, there's a couple of folks, and we're retired, semi-retired folks that have worked around this stuff for many years and know it very well, but we're not the professional staff per se.
Right.
We know the geography and a lot of the relationships around that, but I think just having the capacity to really get up and go with this idea, to do sufficient homework. I mean, when you hear about the idea, it sounds really great, but then you got to start looking into the details about, who's gonna take care of it. What about the operations and maintenance? What happens if something goes wrong in a remote setting of the trail? What about fire safety and public safety? What about the neighbors that the trail goes past? How's this make them feel? So there's many questions that we really have to work on, and doing that work in the face of people saying, I want to go ride this right now, or I want to go walk it. That's the other part. It feels like there's so much enthusiasm. We have to kind of pace ourselves through that enthusiasm so that we don't get ahead of ourselves and that we can ask the hard questions and do the hard work before we just get to the fun stuff. That's probably been the biggest challenge.
Well, I've got to thank you for doing this. I mean, your passion is contagious, and it sounds like there's others on your team that are equally as passionate.
Yep.
So you've got to have that driving force, the human being that keeps making it go. It's
really a special place, both from a human history and a natural history standpoint. I got to know the SalmonBerry. I was an interpreter on the train when the train went through. Some of the first kind of tour trains that went through there, and talking about sharing with people just the story of that place. It all burned, and the Tillamook burned a few times, and it was about one of the most remote places you could get from Portland. When the rail line was built, and seeing people get excited about those stories and just appreciating being out in a Coast Range forest environment along the rivers. I think that's one of the real exciting parts for me, is being able to help people make those connections with the outdoors and with the communities there as well.
Yes. we're getting a little low on time. I think we talked about before the show that I think a lot of people are getting a little concerned about road riding, a little bit about safety, and are looking for exactly this kind of thing, to get off the highways and not share anything with a car.
Right.
A horse is okay, and just feel safer. So it just seems to be a trend in the way people are feeling about cycling right now.
I agree.
So what's coming up? Again, we're getting a little low on time, but what's coming up for you that you're trying to get going right now?
Well, we're in the process, so as development director, my job is to raise funds to do the homework and then to build the trail. We're in the process of trying to add some capacity to our team, some folks who can help us tell the story, do the planning, and help us raise some funds. So that's kind of a organizational milestone. In the spring and in the summer, we're going to be offering some opportunities to host people, to take people out to see it, and to do some events that can begin to share the vision and the excitement and allow people to see what we have in mind. So, I think if folks are interested in coming out to take a look, drop me a note. Certainly encourage people to look at the website. We've got some great short videos there that will show you what it looks like. A lot of photographs, historic as well as current photographs, and then information about all the planning work that's been done is at salmonberrytrail.org. And we've got a bunch of different social media channels so you can kind of track and see what's happening with us.
Yes, and you do have a great website.
Good.
And so just in conclusion, we can certainly go to your website. How might we be able to help?
Well, I think knowing about it and talking about it and getting excited about it, I think that's the first part. There will come a time where we're going to be asking for volunteers to help us do some preparation and trail work. There's going to be fundraising opportunities for people to join in on. But I think, right now it's really just sharing the excitement and the knowledge about what this can be and telling other folks. And, it's like building a snowman. You start with a little snowball and roll it, and so help us kind of build the momentum for the trail.
And I think we saw that happen with the BV Trail, the Banks for Nonia Trail. Nobody knew about it. Now everybody knows about it. Well, thank you so much,
You're very welcome.
for coming to tell us about this, and we will be spreading the word.
Very good.
It's very exciting.
Thanks for having me.
So we're going to go to a video now, a safety video, and then we'll be back with our second guest and learn about another carless trail, or mostly carless, that's a little further along in restoration process, but suffered a bit of a setback this past summer. And so we'll be meeting Kristen Stallman here in a moment. But first, a video about safety, bicycle safety.
Maybe you ride to school. Maybe you ride for fun. Either way, when you're on a bike, you want to get where you're going safely. To do that, you need to remember a few key things. Be visible, follow the rules of the road, and be predictable.
Okay, that's it, we're done. Well, not done exactly. We might have a few more things to say.
When we say be visible, what we mean is be easy to see.
Drivers should be watching for you, and they are, but do your part. Make sure your bike is ready for riding, and that includes having working lights and reflectors.
In the daytime, wear bright colors. At night, wear something reflective, either clothing or gear. And dress for safety. If you're wearing loose pants, for example, strap down the pant leg on the chain side of the bike, like this, so it won't get caught while you're riding. And wear a bike helmet when you ride. It may or may not be the law where you live, but it's always a good idea.
Of course, part of the idea of wearing a helmet is not to put it to the test, not to have a wreck in the first place. And that's all about where you choose to ride and how you do it.
Bikes are considered vehicles. So when you're riding a bike on the road, follow the same rules as car drivers do. Just like a driver, you need to look for and obey road signs and traffic signals. We're talking stop signs, yield signs, red lights, and so on. Keep to the right, but far enough from parked cars so you don't get clipped by a door that opens suddenly. Usually that's at least 3 feet.
But what happens when you don't have 3 feet? When the lane narrows, for example? That's when you need to take the lane.
Taking the lane means that you move into the center of the lane, just like a car. You should do this when the lane narrows or when you're coming up to an intersection or some other kind of turn. In these situations, the center of the lane is usually the best place to be. When it's time to change lanes, you should look for traffic, signal, and then move one lane at a time. Traffic will always be changing, so it's important to look and signal each time you want to change lanes.
Anytime you're uncomfortable with a traffic situation, you have choices.
You can get off the bike and walk on the sidewalk. You can choose a different route, one that has bike lanes, or slower traffic. Or you can use a combination of bike and transit. But no matter where you're riding, a road or a trail, always watch out for people walking. Move out of their way, and let them know when you're about to pass them on the left.
On your left.
If there's one thing drivers count on, it's predictability. So one of the best ways to be safe is to be predictable. For example, use hand signals before you turn or stop. Ride in the same direction the cars are going, with the flow of traffic, not against it. And don't assume that drivers will see you just because you see them.
You already know this part, but we're gonna say it anyway. Put your phone away while you're riding.
You don't want to be talking or texting because you need to be alert and paying attention to what you're doing. Same goes for earbuds or headphones. You need to hear what's going on around you, so leave them in your bag for later. Keep both hands on the handlebars unless you're signaling, and keep your eyes open for hazards, things like wet roads, gravel, debris, anything that can mess with your ride.
As we said up front, it really comes down to 3 things. Be visible, be predictable, and follow the same rules as a car.
Make sure that drivers can see you, that you let them know what you're about to do, and that you're following the rules of the road. That's it. Have a good ride.
Well, welcome back to Psychology Today. That's a great safety video, just pretty basic stuff, and certainly will help keep you safe out on the road. We're going to be back for our second segment with Kristen Stallman. But first, I just want to quickly mention a few things about winter riding, and that is that it is cold and wet, but there's lots of cycling to be done, and certainly if you pick your moment to get out, it can be a little bit warmer and a little bit drier. So look for those opportunities to get out on your bicycle. I know a lot of us built up kind of a level of fitness over the summer, and boy, it's frustrating to get back on the bike come March or something if you haven't ridden, and a lot of that fitness is gone. So if you can keep riding a little bit or go to the gym or whatever, then your spring and summer riding you hit that fitness level a little faster. Portland Wheelman Touring Club, pwtc.com, has a lot of rides on their calendar. The Wheelmen do offer a ride every single day. So I wanted to mention I'm leading a ride this Saturday, which is December 16th. We're going to ride our bikes to BikeCraft, which is a sale of, like I mentioned at the beginning of the show, entrepreneurs who have bicycle-related things for sale at the Bike Farm in Portland. And that's kind of near the Lloyd Center, more or less, in that general vicinity. So we'll start Wilshire Park. If the weather's good, we'll go about 23 miles. If it's not good, we'll go about 6 there and back. Just go there directly. So lots of fun rides there. And then this coming weekend, the 17th, one of our club members is offering a Christmas light ride. So starting at their house, and we'll just ride around part of Portland and see some nice just family lights and houses lit up. There's also a Christmas ride, and it's called the Christmas Morning Coffee Quest. So where else but in Portland, where is the coffee on Christmas morning? Who's open, and where can we get a cup of coffee? So check ride schedules, check the meetup.com, check the different bike clubs, look for rides that are going to meet your needs and get out there and ride. So let's meet our second guest. Welcome, Kristen Stallman from ODOT. Hi, thanks for coming.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So I have your position as Strategic Policy Advisor, ODOT, Oregon Department of Transportation, Region 1, Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area. That's quite a mouthful.
It is a mouthful.
So what do you do?
For the last 10 years I've worked at ODOT. I've been the Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Coordinator, where I got to work in one of the most beautiful places in our state, the Columbia River Gorge, and on the historic Columbia River Highway and the historic Highway State Trail. Most recently, in the last couple months, I've taken a new position. So there's a new Columbia River Gorge National Scenic Area Coordinator, Tara Lingley, but I'm trying to help her understand what the job is all about, so give her some background. But I have a long history and a passion for the gorge and the historic highway.
Sounds like the plum job to me.
It's probably one of the best jobs in the state, I'd have to say.
So, but are you a cyclist? Do you ride a bike?
Yes, of course. I've ridden a bike my whole life. I'm a bike commuter, fair weather bike commuter. I don't really go in the, but I have two girls, 9 and 14, and teaching them how to ride, so the rules of the road, and trying to get them to feel more confident on the street and riding their bikes, encourage them to ride their bikes to school. So we've been doing more family rides. And like you mentioned earlier, those multi-use paths, those car-free experiences are great for our family.
Yes, yeah, that gives you a lot of relief, doesn't it? That you don't have to worry about traffic while they continue to learn.
Yes.
And so you shared about your career. So how did you end up in the Portland area?
I came to Oregon for college, so I went to the University of Oregon, where I studied landscape architecture. I fell in love with Oregon at that time, and I'm from back east, but I decided to stay, and I remember moving to Portland and like discovering what the city had to offer, and that seems like, well, is a long time ago now. Yeah. Well,
cool. It's always fun to hear how people came here. So Psychology Today does focus on bicycling, but obviously, as you just described, the Gorge area is multifaceted. So we appreciate this is going to be a pretty broad discussion and not just focusing on cycling. I wanted to share a quick quote that I pulled off of the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway site, which kind of supports what you just said. And the quote is, "If all Americans knew of Oregon's natural wonders, fewer would go to Europe in quest of scenic beauty." And so that's from 1920, Cross and Dimmitt, and it's from the Columbia River Highway, America's Greatest Scenic Drive. Yeah. So here we have America's Greatest Scenic Drive, at least in someone's definition, right in our backyard. So we're going to focus on that. Let's talk about, I want to hear what kind of like a typical day would have been like. How was your year going before this fire started, the Eagle Creek fire? Yeah. How was your summer before that? What were you doing?
Well, you know, the historic Columbia River Highway is beloved by all, especially for those of us who get the privilege to live in Portland and to call the Gorge our backyard. And we love to take our guests there. I don't know if you do that too. Whenever you have visitors come to town, and think about all the new people moving to Portland and they're going out and trying to explore. So we've been working really hard at ODOT. One of the biggest issues we've been working on is the congestion issue, especially probably for the cyclists who've been out there. I almost encourage people, don't go out on a Saturday afternoon to the historic Columbia River Highway, especially those sections around Multnomah Falls, because it's really, really crowded. So we've been working on figuring out what to do with the congestion and the safety issues around everybody trying to get into the gorge. So one of our projects we worked on in the last 2 years was a Columbia Gorge Express, which was a new public transit to the gorge. So you could take a public bus on weekends, Friday, Saturday, or Sunday, to Multnomah Falls to try to alleviate some of the pressure on the parking lot out there. So we were working on that, trying to make sure that was up and operating. We don't run a lot of transit services at ODOT, but it fits within our bill as a transportation agency.
Interesting.
And to provide safe access. And so we were working on that. We were working on actually the weekend of the fire. We were collecting data because we're doing a large-scale congestion study right now on the historic Columbia River Highway to figure out what are the long-term improvements we can do to really protect that really special place, because so many people want to get there, but is it as special when it's that crowded?
Yeah. Yeah, and people won't go then.
Yeah.
Or it's a frustrating experience. I just want to share, this is years ago, I was riding my bike in that area, and I think I was at the Women's Forum. And I heard some tourists talking about how special this all was and how beautiful, and it kind of woke me up to, well, yeah, we got this really great place right in our backyard. I was taking it for granted, and that kind of reawoke.
We do. We're really lucky to have that. And I think over the summer with the events of the Eagle Creek Fire, we realized what a great place and what a special place the Columbia Gorge is to us all.
It sure is. So you were busy and just doing your job and trying to figure out how to make things better. And then there's a fire. So let's start with just your emotions and your professional concerns when you find out there's a fire.
Yeah, because I've worked for the last 10 years in the Gorge. A lot of our projects, it was just a really nerve-wracking time because you don't know, and you couldn't get in there. You didn't know how bad it was going to be. I remember that Monday night where it was like, it almost reminds me a lot of the California fires where everything went crazy and you just felt the wind, and then we woke up in the morning and the ash was all over our cars and you just felt like, oh, what does this mean? I was just really not knowing what to expect because it's something that I've worked on for the last 10 years, but the Columbia Gorge National Scenic Area celebrated its 30 years in 2017 as well, so it's an important year, and we just not knowing, I think, because we couldn't get in there because they were closed out and the fire was still going on, and so trying to wait till we could actually go safe, get in there to do assessment of what happened to the gorge. So at ODOT, our priority was opening up Interstate 84, and then the parts of the highway are still closed to this day, but opening up the sections we can, the drivable sections of the highway first, and now we're just assessing the damage that was done to the trail itself.
Okay. And you're right, I-84 was critical for everyone to get that going again. So the rest of it had to wait. And so tell us about some of your personal incidents during the fire, things that you worked on, and just what happened to you, good and bad. Good and bad.
Well, it was partly like, I was like a lot of the rest of us, trying to get our information from the news, going to websites, trying to see. Actually, I saw that the Oneonta Tunnel burned from just scanning the web to try to get a sense of what was actually happening. And the Oneonta Tunnel was a project we worked on 2009 to open up an abandoned tunnel, part of the old highway that was abandoned and filled in, and we opened it back up and put these timbers in just in 2009, and it was pretty heart-wrenching to see that timber structure burn. So I was like, oh, and not knowing, but weeks passed, and we were able to go out there, and the trail is still there, and you'll hear people say the gorge is still there. And I think one of the best things about the highway, though the trails may be closed right now, we as cyclists and folks who like to get out on the historic highway can really, hopefully in the coming summer, we get that open and safe, go out and ride the historic highway. You may not be able to hike, but you can get into the gorge. The way the highway was designed was to connect us with nature. So you'll get the views of the waterfall, the spray, the scenic vistas. That will all be there. You might be on the road as you see it, but that's perfect because that's how the highway was originally designed.
So it's still there. It might be different in places, but it's still there. Well, that's encouraging. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I've seen one description, a mosaic of damage. That's kind of poetic, a mosaic of damage pertaining to the burned area. So how would you describe what you've seen?
What I've seen is that the fire is crazy. Like the bottom of some of the white wooden guardrail would be totally burned, but the top of it's fine. The way the mosaic is a great way to describe it. The trail is in pretty good shape, except for what we're really worried about are the rock fall and the trees. destabilize the slopes. And so this winter it'll be interesting to see how much damage happens, how many rocks fall, what the trees are. That's why it's closed. It's a really kind of unsafe place to be. We're working with our partners at state parks and the Forest Service to do what we can to open up as quickly as possible. But it may be different when we open it up, and that's one of the things we're looking at, especially for the drivable sections. Some of the congestion study ideas that are happening at this time is one idea that we're floating right now, is potentially making the highway between Bridal Veil and Ainsworth, past the most congested areas of Waukena and Multnomah Falls, one way. Trying to give a little more space for the cyclists, and it's a pretty narrow road the way it was designed originally. It's very narrow for the Model Ts. So that's one thing we're investigating right now, and using the opportunity of this closure to say, when we open it up, could we do it a little bit different? Could we improve the experience for everybody?
Sure, because you'll be doing things anyway, so now might be a good time to modify some things.
So it could present an opportunity for us. We knew what was happening last summer before that wasn't really good for the historic highway. The congestion, the crowding, things need to change. We need to take a new approach to how we look at that area. So we're looking at that. We're working with all our partners to kind of see what would be best and maybe try things out. We're calling it pilot projects.
Oh, yeah. I really like the way you and Doug talk about groups of people, all kinds of perceptions of things and experiences and skills and abilities come together and bounce ideas off of one another, and that's really interesting. I like that.
You were saying a mosaic too, and I just want to point out that a large section of the gorge was untouched. We have an extremely exciting project for those who like to cycle under construction right now. So if you drive 84, you'll notice that the lanes are kind of restricted. There's some construction happening. We're constructing a 3-mile section of trail between Wyeth and Lindsay Creek. If you've ever ridden I-84 through the gorge, you surely won't forget riding by Shell Rock Mountain. This will, which is probably one of the scariest places on a bike, because you have a 4-foot shoulder with these semi-tractor trailers going by. We are constructing a new trail around Shell Rock Mountain, a new 500-long-foot viaduct, and then the Lindsay Creek Bench. It's going to be the most beautiful trail. I'm just so excited to share it with people. It's going to open summer of 2019. And it's going to come out of the ground. So you'll, as you drive the gorge, you'll start to see it. So get in shape, get ready to go out there and cycle, because it's 3 miles, but it connects to a section of trail we opened just in 2016, the Starvation Creek to Lindsay Creek section, and then there's already a section between Viento. So you'll be able to actually ride all the way from Troutdale on the drivable sections of the highway through to Cascade Locks on the trail. There's a parallel route to Wyeth, and then all the way to Viento in 2019. So we're making huge progress on the trail connections.
You know, I mean, this just seems so devastating. It seems like you just all pack up your bags and say, forget it, I'm done. And yet you're not. You're going forward, and you've even got new stuff coming, and you're
we've got some great stuff happening.
Oh, that is so exciting.
And and I encourage everybody to go east too. What a great opportunity to discover the Eastern Gorge.
Yes.
And there's amazing old road, historic highway between Hood River and the Dalles. We have trail between Hood River and Mosier if you don't want to mess with the cars. It's fantastic, and spring is an awesome time to explore that section of the historic Columbia River Highway.
The wildflowers, yes. So you kind of want to watch those wildflowers, because I know people love it then. That is, I don't know, you've just been really encouraging. So what are some of the worst hit areas then? I think you kind of touched on
well, the Oneonta Tunnel. The other section that was really hard hit is if it's the Eagle Creek area, because that's where the fire started. And a lot of your riders will recognize the staircase at Eagle Creek. That area right above the staircase is called the Eagle Creek Viaduct. That area probably burned pretty hot through there. A lot of the trees are damaged. You felt like you weren't right on the interstate on that section, but right now the interstate is really visible, and all the trees are gone. So we have to figure out a way to put up new guardrail. A lot of the old guardrail is burned or completely gone. So that section will take a little bit of work to get that safe, those areas right near Eagle Creek itself.
And I think of that as more kind of remote. I mean, it's not like you're just going to drive a truck up there with some fencing. You're going it's a little more
bit harder to get to. It's right. It's not too difficult. It's just figuring out the funding sources, the
Yeah.
emergency funding, or who's going to pay for it.
Yes.
It's all those things of getting all that built and put back into
Okay.
place.
Okay. So I have some friends that always do a bike trip on Memorial Day, starting in Vancouver and going on the north side of the Columbia River, and then come around and then come back, and they spend the night at Viento. Are they going to theoretically get stopped? I know it's kind of hard to tell.
It's hard
at
to
this
say
point.
Memorial Day. It's hard to know exactly when the trail will be open at this time. It's sort of what happens in the winter. I mean,
Yes.
like if there's a lot of rockfall, it may clear out some of the loose stuff, which may be good, that we'll be able to like get the loose stuff cleared off. And so it's really on parks to figure out when they can get out there. But I think you'll be back riding sometime this summer on the historic highway.
Good.
Yeah, and the other exciting thing is next summer, 2018, the Columbia Gorge Express, that transit, is going all the way to Hood River. So we're looking at working with Travel Oregon, some partners, to look at doing car-free itineraries. So if you don't want to bring your car to the gorge, encouraging people to stay in those local communities that have been really hard hit by the fire, like Cascade Locks, Hood River, the Washington side. All those places are really hurting because they lost a big chunk of their economic income during those fire times. So I encourage people to stay overnight, spend money in the gorge and those local communities too.
Good suggestion. And anybody that has owned a small business or knows somebody that has a small business, that's just devastating when there's no cash flow because of this fire. And then to try to pick back up and get inventory in, and people are a little apprehensive. Can I go in there? Yeah, let's get out there. Good advice. So, what are the plans to like clean up? I mean, how did that even happen? And who organizes this? The trees and things that are down, and is it going to be tidy and pristine, or are we going to be looking at kind of a mess?
It'll probably be a mess for a while. It'll be safe when it does open. Its safety will be in mind for the users. The state parks does the maintenance, and we work with them at the Department of Transportation if it's right along our roadway facilities. And to maintain safety is the highest priority.
Yes.
So you'll see some burnt trees, I'm sure. We're looking at how do we replace the guardrail. Some signs have burned. Some of them are some are in good shape. They're not bad at all. So it's sort of like we're doing the assessment now, and we'll start repairing it as the weather allows in the coming weeks and months. But again, what kind of winter are we going to have? And what is winter going to do to that damaged actually, if you
area?
think about it, last winter was a terrible winter too for snow, and there was a huge landslide that we forget now that closed the highway for like a month or two. You know, it was so that could all happen again. It's just Gorge is such a dynamic place. It's what makes it a beautiful place, but it's kind of a hard place to keep a trail open. So we just have to be on top of it and do our best.
So we have been seeing little by little things we're opening, because at first you couldn't get beyond the Women's Forum. And now you can get to Crown Point?
You can get to Crown Point. You can get all the way down to Bridal Veil.
Okay.
Doing it by bike is a great way to see it because the trails are still closed. Like you can get to you can do the viewing platform at Lateral Falls, but the regular hiking trails are closed. So experience the gorge by bike is a really good opportunity to get out into the gorge, but not really go into those really unsafe areas off the trails.
Gotcha. And the lodge opened up. Yep. The Multnomah Falls Lodge has opened up. So how would we access that?
That's a little bit more challenging on a bike. To get to Multnomah Falls right now, you have to go on I-84 to that lot in the middle of I-84. That's the only way you can access Multnomah Falls at this point, because that section of the historic highway is closed.
Right. And your bus doesn't run this
It doesn't
time of
run
year?
it runs May through September.
Okay.
Next year we're looking at making it year-round, so there'll be more opportunities next year to get out there.
That is so great. And I gather...
And it has rooms for bikes.
Yes.
So we're looking at we're actually getting new buses with bike trailers. So
awesome.
to really accommodate the cyclists.
So you're right. If I really want to go further east, I might need a little assist. And you might have one for me. Oh, that is so cool. So obviously that was a very successful idea.
Yes.
Because you're building on it some more.
Yes. Yeah.
And alleviates yeah, we have been on our bikes and not been able to get to the falls and turned around and gone back, which we could do on a bike, and the cars were stuck there. So I'm so glad you're trying to
We're trying to figure it out. We don't have it solved yet, but if anybody has any great ideas, this is the time to share them with us, because it's all in that planning stage. The good news is that we're collecting data. We're doing traffic counts. We're collecting pedestrians and data last summer, but the week before the fire. So we were able to collect all our data.
Good.
So we have all that good information. There were some traffic counters. I mean, the data we had counters out for Labor Day weekend. Well, that was kind of ruined because of the fire, but we have enough data the weekend before to really help us make some good decisions.
You've got the facts that you need. So we're just about out of time, but I wanted to just kind of briefly, we had Doug Decker talking about the SalmonBerry Trail, and that's a rails to trails, whereas the historic highway is not. But how would you compare the two?
I think they're super similar. I think they're both what we like to call signature trails. So I think they're connected too. Imagine a day in the future when you can ride from the Dalles, like the central eastern Oregon wheat fields, through the Columbia River Gorge, through Portland, our major metropolis, out through the Coast Range to the Oregon coast. You get a whole taste of Oregon in that whole experience. So that's going to be fantastic.
I'm going to have to stay in shape and get an electric bike.
Those are really popular now too on the historic highway.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Kristen.
Thank you.
I am really encouraged. Thank you so much. That was good news all the way around. So I want to mention that the Gorge Ride will be offered in June 16th of 2018. That's a way that the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway raise money to restore the old scenic highway. And so that starts in the Dalles and goes to Hood River. So plan on doing that ride to support them and to see some of the gorge that we've been talking about. It's a great opportunity, well supported, very popular bicycle ride. So you can go to the Friends of the Historic Columbia River Highway website and get information on that, and I'm sure they'll open up registration before too long. So I want to thank Doug Decker and Kristen Stallman for joining us on Psychology Today. I know that I'm enthused in this cold winter day to ride my bike due to the information that they shared with us, and thank you for joining us. And Northwest Bicycle Safety Council does promote safe riding. So we want you to obey the law and ride safely with a level of skill. Look for rides on Portland Wheelman Touring Club's website that Bruce Buffington and I are leading. There's lots of great rides, but particularly Bruce and I lead rides that might be slower and will definitely look out for you and take care of you. We won't drop you, as they say, and come out and ride with us this winter or in the spring and get to enjoy the sport of cycling. And again, at portlandwheelmantouringclub.com. You can increase your skills and your level of fitness by riding with a group. So I encourage you to find a group that meets your needs. Thanks for joining us.